My wife tried to trap me with 24 non-negotiable demands to control my every move, but I rejected her ultimatum and ended our marriage on my terms. The moment she slapped that folder on our dining table, I knew our marriage had hit a point of no return. 24 non-negotiable demands, she announced with an unsettling smile that didn't reach her eyes. I've been thinking about what would make our marriage work better for me. Not for us, for her 3 years of marriage had gradually transformed the woman I fell in love with into someone I barely recognized. The control issues started small, suggestions about my clothes, comments about my friends, questions about my schedule. But that night, as I flipped through her meticulously typed list, I realized she had been building to this power play all along. The demands ranged from absurd to downright controlling. I had to text her my location throughout the day. All my social plans needed her approval 72 hours in advance. My friends, particularly female ones, required her vetting. My paycheck would go into an account she managed. Even my gym time was restricted to hours she deemed appropriate. You don't need to respond right now, she said, mistaking my silence for consideration rather than the cold calculation it actually was. But I need your agreement by the end of the week. Instead of erupting, which is exactly what she wanted to provoke, I simply folded the paper and nodded. I'll review these carefully, I replied, maintaining eye contact until she looked away first. The flash of uncertainty in her expression was my first small victory. That night, while she slept, I photographed her ridiculous manifesto and began planning my counter-strategy. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a declaration of war against my autonomy, and I wasn't about to surrender. I started small. The next morning, I didn't text her when I left for work. When she called, demanding to know why, I simply said I was driving and hung up. That evening, I arrived home an hour later than usual, offering no explanation. Did you forget our new agreement? She asked, arms crossed in the kitchen. I didn't agree to anything, I replied calmly, pouring myself a drink. And I won't be. Her face flushed. So, you're just dismissing everything I need in this relationship? No, I said. I'm dismissing your attempt to control me. There's a difference. Over the next 2 weeks, I systematically broke every single one of her non-negotiable demands. I stayed out late with friends. I made financial decisions without consulting her. I reconnected with old college friends, including women she had tried to erase from my life. Each violation of her rules was met with escalating reactions. Tears, silent treatment, slamming doors. I remained unmoved. When she threatened to leave, I simply shrugged and said, "That's your choice to make." The balance of power was shifting and it infuriated her. She hadn't expected resistance, let alone complete rejection of her tactics. One night, after a particularly heated argument where she accused me of destroying our marriage, I finally laid it out plainly. A marriage isn't a dictatorship, I told her, and I won't be managed like an employee. Either we're equals or we're nothing. She stormed out, staying at her sister's for 3 days. When she returned, there was a new tension between us. She realized her control strategy had backfired spectacularly. But instead of reconsidering her approach, she doubled down with more subtle manipulation tactics. What she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead of her, and her list of demands had given me all the clarity I needed. If she wanted a power struggle, I would give her one, but on my terms, with my rules, and with an endgame she never saw coming. The more I pushed back against her demands, the more desperate her control tactics became. She would wait up until I came home, arms crossed, ready for confrontation. Her attempts at manipulation cycled predictably between rage, tears, and occasional moments of forced affection that felt more strategic than sincere. One morning, I found my credit cards missing from my wallet. When confronted, she claimed she'd put them somewhere safe until we could align on our financial priorities. Demand number 7 on her list. Without a word, I made a single phone call to the bank, reported them stolen, and had new cards expedited to my office address. The look on her face when I used my replacement card at dinner that weekend was worth every penny of the express shipping fee. "You're determined to undermine me at every turn," she hissed across the restaurant table. "No," I replied, signing the receipt. "I'm determined to live as an adult who doesn't need permission to access his own money." Her control playbook expanded. She began showing up unannounced at my workplace, claiming she just wanted to have lunch but really checking if I was where I said I'd be. She installed tracking apps on my phone while I slept. I discovered and deleted them the same day she even contacted some of my friends' partners, suggesting we should all coordinate our social calendars better, a transparent attempt to monitor my movements through others. Each move was met with a calm but firm counter-move from me. When she installed the tracking apps, I bought a second phone for work and kept my primary one at home during the day. When she scheduled surprise couples therapy, I simply didn't show up and took myself to a baseball game instead. I began documenting every controlling incident, saving texts, and recording particularly volatile conversations, building my case methodically. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. I was no longer playing defense. I was dictating the tempo of our interaction. For the first time in months, I saw genuine anxiety in her eyes, the realization that her grip was slipping. During dinner one evening, she tried a new approach, reaching for my hand across the table. "I feel like we're drifting apart," she said, her voice deliberately softened. "Maybe I came on too strong with the list. We could revise it together." I withdrew my hand. "There will be no list," I said. "Not 24 demands, not 12, not even one. That's not how I operate, and it's not what I signed up for when we got married." "So, what do you want?" she asked, frustration breaking through her calculated vulnerability. "Respect," I answered, "and the self-awareness to recognize that you've been trying to cage something that doesn't belong to you. My autonomy." Her facade cracked completely. "You've changed," she snapped. "You never stood up to me like this before." "I've awakened," I corrected her, "and I won't go back to sleep." That night, I overheard her on the phone with her sister, her voice shaking with anger as she complained about my sudden rebellion. What she called rebellion, I recognized as self-respect. And with each day that passed, it became increasingly clear that these two things, her need for control and my self-respect, could not coexist within our marriage. The breaking point came when I discovered she'd gone through my email. She'd found messages from an old female friend from college, completely innocent conversations about a group reunion. Taking it upon herself, she responded, posing as me, declining the invitation, and suggesting the friend not contact me again. Instead of confronting her immediately, I made a decisive call to my lawyer. The time for subtle resistance was over. If she wanted to play with ultimatums, I would show her what a real non-negotiable demand looked like. My meeting with the lawyer was enlightening. As I laid out the pattern of controlling behavior, from the infamous list to the email impersonation, he didn't seem surprised. "Unfortunately common," he noted, sliding a folder across his desk. "But you've done something uncommon. You've documented everything. That gives us options." I left his office with a clear roadmap for extraction from my marriage and a weight lifted from my shoulders. The decision was made. No more tactical skirmishes. I was preparing for the final checkmate. At home, I maintained the outward appearance of our Cold War while executing my plan meticulously. I secured important documents, gradually moved personal items to a private storage unit, and diverted a portion of my income to an account she couldn't access, not out of pettiness but self-preservation. Her next move proved I was right to be cautious. "I've been thinking about starting a family," she announced over breakfast, her tone falsely casual. "I stopped taking my birth control 3 weeks ago. I nearly choked on my coffee. This wasn't just another control tactic, it was an attempt at permanent entanglement." "That's a decision we would make together," I replied evenly, "and we are nowhere near ready for that conversation." "I thought it might fix things between us," she pressed, watching my reaction carefully. "A child isn't relationship glue," I said, standing to leave. "And I won't be trapped that way." That night, I slept in the guest room and made an appointment for a vasectomy consultation. Her escalation had accelerated my timeline. Meanwhile, I reconnected with friends she'd systematically alienated throughout our marriage. One weekend, while she visited her parents, I met up with my old college group, 5 of us who had once been inseparable. Among them was Rachel, whose only crime had been maintaining a close friendship with me before I met my wife. She actually called me once, Rachel revealed over drinks. 2 months after your wedding, told me it was inappropriate for me to send you birthday wishes and that I should respect boundaries. The others had similar stories. Invitations declined on my behalf. Text messages I supposedly never wanted to receive. Social media blocks I'd never initiated. She had constructed invisible walls around me, and I'd allowed it to happen. "We thought you just moved on," my friend said, "until Tom ran into you last month and said you seemed different, like you were waking up from something." Tom raised his glass to clear eyes. That evening changed everything. As we reminisced and laughed, I felt like myself again, not the careful walking on eggshells version I'd become. When Rachel suggested taking a group photo, something clicked into place. The final piece of my plan materialized. "I need a favor," I told them. "Something that might seem strange but could help me end this situation definitively." By the time I drove home the next day, we had a strategy. My friends would come over for dinner that Friday, exactly when my wife would be returning from her business trip. Rachel, who had become a successful videographer, would ensure everything was documented discreetly. It would be the push I needed to break this stalemate decisively. My wife called that evening, checking in with thinly veiled interrogation questions about what I'd done that weekend. I answered truthfully but vaguely, feeling no obligation to detail my movements. "You're acting distant," she accused. "I'm acting independent," I corrected. "There's a difference." After hanging up, I texted the group chat we'd created. "Friday's confirmed. Operation Non-Negotiable is a go." For the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Her precious list of demands had unwittingly given me the perfect title for the document I was preparing with my lawyer: Acceptance of Non-Negotiable Terms. Inside would be divorce papers ready for her signature. The countdown had begun. The anticipation of Friday fueled me through the week. Each day I refined the details of my plan with surgical precision. The divorce papers arrived from my lawyer, neatly organized in a cream-colored envelope with subtle gold lettering that read, "Acceptance of Non-Negotiable Terms." An irony she wouldn't appreciate until it was too late. I confirmed with my friends, emphasizing the importance of Rachel's presence. My wife's irrational fixation on her made Rachel the perfect catalyst. Years ago, when I'd mentioned going to Rachel's photography exhibition, my wife had launched into a jealous tirade despite never having met her. That unfounded jealousy had been one of the first red flags I'd ignored, a mistake I wouldn't repeat. On Thursday, I prepared the house meticulously. I cleaned every surface, arranged comfortable seating in the living room, and stocked the fridge with everyone's favorites. In my office, I installed a small camera that would capture her reaction to the divorce papers, evidence in case she tried to claim I'd ambushed or coerced her. My wife called that evening with her usual check-in, her voice honeyed with forced sweetness. "I'm wrapping up earlier than expected," she said. "I'll be home around 6 tomorrow instead of 8. Perfect timing." I told my friends to arrive at 5:30. "That works out well," I replied casually. "I'll be home." "Anything special planned for dinner?" she probed, always fishing for details to control. "Actually, yes," I answered truthfully. "But it's a surprise." Her momentary silence spoke volumes. "You know I don't like surprises. This one will be memorable," I promised. "See you tomorrow." Friday arrived with a strange calm. I worked from home, positioned the envelope prominently on the dining table, and confirmed final details with my friends. Rachel would arrive first with her equipment, setting up the discreet recording devices while I pretended to help her with a photography project, a cover story in case my wife arrived early. At 5:15, Rachel's car pulled into the driveway. Seeing her walk toward my door stirred conflicted emotions, not romantic ones, but regret for the friendship I'd allowed to wither under my wife's jealous demands. "Ready for this?" Rachel asked, equipment bag slung over her shoulder. "More than ready," I assured her, stepping aside to let her in. She worked efficiently, placing tiny cameras that would capture every angle of the coming confrontation. "These are motion-activated and will upload to secure cloud storage," she explained. "No matter what happens, you'll have documentation." By 5:40, the others arrived, Tom, Alex, and the twins, Sarah and Michael. We arranged ourselves casually in the living room with drinks and snacks, creating the perfect tableau of a relaxed social gathering that would greet my wife upon her return. "She just texted," I announced at 5:55. 5 minutes out. Rachel gave me a reassuring nod and subtly checked that her main camera was recording. The others continued their conversation, but I noticed their posture straighten slightly, a collective bracing for impact. At precisely 6:02, I heard the distinctive sound of her car in the driveway, then the jingle of keys. The front door opened. The momentary silence as she processed the scene before her was deafening. 5 faces turned toward her, friendly, smiling, and completely unexpected. And in the center of them all was Rachel, the woman she'd demonized without justification for years. "Surprise," I said calmly, raising my glass in greeting. "Welcome home." Her expression cycled through confusion, shock, and then settled on cold fury. She stood frozen in the doorway, designer suitcase still in hand, as though unsure whether to enter her own home or flee. "What is this?" she finally managed, her voice dangerously quiet. "Just catching up with old friends," I replied. "You remember mentioning how we don't socialize enough as a couple? I thought I'd get a head start." Her eyes locked onto Rachel, narrowing with recognition. "You invited her to our house?" The venom in her voice was unmistakable. "I invited all of them to our house," I corrected. Rachel kindly helped organize it. The stage was set. Act 1 of my carefully orchestrated evening was unfolding exactly as planned. As my wife's face contorted with barely contained rage, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The woman I'd once loved had been replaced by this controlling stranger long ago. Tonight would be the final act of a marriage that should have ended months earlier. I gestured toward the dining room where the envelope waited. "Why don't you put down your bag? There's something on the table you should see." I finally decided to address your non-negotiable demands. Her gaze darted between the envelope on the table and Rachel, calculating which threat to address first. The room fell silent, my friends watching with the cautious attention of people witnessing a controlled demolition. "Everyone out," she demanded, dropping her suitcase with a thud. "Now, they're my guests," I countered evenly. "And they're staying." Her face flushed crimson. "You deliberately planned this. Bringing these people. Bringing her into our home when you knew I'd be arriving tired from a business trip. Deliberate as your list of 24 demands," I confirmed. "Consider this my response." She took 3 quick steps toward Rachel, finger pointed accusingly. "You. I know exactly what you're trying to do." Rachel remained perfectly composed, her expression neutral as the camera in her hand continued recording. "We've never actually met," she reminded my wife, "though you did call me once to tell me I couldn't wish my friend happy birthday anymore." "He's not your friend," my wife hissed. "He's my husband." "I'm not your property," I interjected, moving to stand between them. "That's the fundamental thing you've never understood." For a fleeting moment, uncertainty flickered across her face, the realization that she had miscalculated badly. Then her expression hardened again. "So, this is what, some kind of intervention? You gathered your little friends to gang up on me?" "No," I replied. "They're here to witness something important." The envelope on the table. The one that says acceptance of non-negotiable terms. "Why don't you open it?" Her eyes narrowed suspiciously, but curiosity won out. She snatched the envelope from the table, tearing it open with sharp, angry movements. She pulled out the documents. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion, then to stunned disbelief as understanding dawned. "Divorce papers," she whispered. Then louder, "Divorce papers?" "My non-negotiable terms," I confirmed. "One demand, not 24. I want my freedom back." She flipped through the pages, her hands shaking. "You can't be serious. You're ending our marriage because I asked you to respect some basic boundaries?" "Control isn't a boundary," I corrected. "And what you gave me wasn't a request, it was an ultimatum. I'm simply responding in kind." "In front of an audience," she screamed, throwing the papers at me. "With cameras? What kind of sick humiliation is this?" "Documentation," I clarified, gesturing toward Rachel. "After you impersonated me in emails, hid my credit cards and tracked my movements, I needed witnesses and evidence. Your behavior has been escalating for months." Her strategy shifted instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by wounded vulnerability. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought we were happy. I just wanted us to be closer." I'd revisited this moment countless times in my mind, each time feeling the same mix of anger and sorrow. Her tears, once capable of softening my resolve, now felt like another calculated move in a game I'd grown tired of playing. "Closer doesn't mean consumed," I replied, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "It doesn't mean controlled. It doesn't mean isolated from friends or constantly monitored." "I can change," she promised, reaching for my hand, her eyes pleading in a way that once might have swayed me. I stepped back, maintaining distance, the weight of her betrayal anchoring my resolve. "You've had multiple opportunities to change. Instead, each time I pushed back against a control tactic, you simply found a more subtle one. The latest being your attempt to get pregnant without my consent." Her eyes widened at the exposure of her secret plan. "That's not—" "We both know exactly what it was," I interrupted, my voice cutting through her denial. "A trap." She glanced around the room, suddenly aware of the witnesses to her manipulation. Abandoning the tears, she grabbed the divorce papers from the floor and tore them in half. "I won't sign these. You want out? You'll have to fight me for everything." I couldn't help but smile, which only inflamed her fury further. "Those were copies," I informed her. "The originals were filed yesterday, and as for fighting, my lawyer has all the documentation needed regarding your behavior. I'm not looking to take anything that isn't mine. I just want to end this cleanly." "You think you've won," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You think you're so clever with your friends and your cameras and your little ambush." "This isn't about winning," I replied, though the sting of her words lingered, reminding me of the love we'd lost. "It's about escaping a toxic relationship before it destroys us both." She looked around at the silent observers, my friends who had witnessed her transition from rage to tears to threats in the span of minutes. Whatever calculation she was making behind those eyes, I could see the moment she realized she had lost control of the narrative. "This isn't over," she warned, grabbing her suitcase. "Not by a long shot." "Actually," I said quietly, a quiet resolve settling over me, "it is." The front door slammed with such force that picture frames rattled on the walls. For a moment, the house was perfectly still, as if holding its breath after a storm. Then Tom broke the silence with a low whistle. "That was—" He trailed off, searching for the right word. "Necessary," I finished for him, "and long overdue." My friends exchanged glances, a mix of concern and relief in their expressions. Rachel checked her equipment. "Got everything," she confirmed. "Crystal clear audio and video. If she tries any revisionist history about what happened here, you're covered." I nodded, feeling a strange lightness spreading through me, though it was tinged with an unexpected grief. For months, I'd been strategizing, documenting, planning this moment, fueled by anger and determination. Now that it had arrived, the sensation wasn't just triumph, it was liberation. But it came at a cost. I had loved her once, deeply, and a part of me mourned the woman she used to be, the one I thought I'd spend my life with. That woman was gone, replaced by someone whose need for control had suffocated us both. Yet, even as I stood on the precipice of freedom, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for what we'd lost. Not just the marriage, but the trust, the dreams, the shared moments that had once felt so real. Still, I knew this was the only path forward. The clarity of that realization, painful as it was, gave me the strength to keep going. "You think she'll come back tonight?" Sarah asked, glancing toward the door. "No," I replied with certainty. "Her pride won't let her. She'll go to her sister's, regroup, and try to figure out how to regain control of the situation, which she can't." "Because you've already filed the papers," Alex added. I nodded, and secured my finances, documented her behavior, and consulted my lawyer about the house. There's nothing left for her to control. We moved to the kitchen, where the tension gradually dissolved into conversation and eventually even laughter. Friends I'd been separated from for years slipped back into my life as if no time had passed. It struck me how much I'd sacrificed to appease someone who saw my relationships as threats rather than connections. My phone buzzed repeatedly throughout the evening, first with angry texts, then tearful voicemails, and finally vague threats about what her brother, a paralegal at a small firm, would do to destroy me in court. I silenced the notifications without responding. There was nothing left to say. Around midnight, after my friends had left, I sat alone in the quiet house, scrolling through the barrage of messages she'd sent. The pattern was textbook: anger, bargaining, guilt trips, threats, and finally a desperate attempt at reconciliation. Her final message read, "Please call me. I know we can work this out. I'll tear up my list. We can start fresh." Too late. The list had merely been the catalyst, the culminating evidence of a pattern that had been developing for years. My response was simple and final. "The papers are filed. Please communicate through my lawyer from now on." I blocked her number after that, but not before a wave of exhaustion hit me. The weight of those 3 years, the constant vigilance, the slow erosion of who I was, it all crashed over me. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom, I was fighting to reclaim myself. And though I felt a flicker of sorrow for the life we might have had, I knew I'd made the right choice. The next 3 months were predictably turbulent. She refused to accept service of the divorce papers, forcing my lawyer to pursue alternative methods. She attempted to drain our joint account, only to discover I'd already secured my portion. She showed up at my workplace once, creating a scene that only strengthened my case when security footage captured her behavior. Her sister called to berate me, then unexpectedly lowered her voice to admit, "She's been like this since we were kids, always had to control everything and everyone. I love her, but I understand why you're doing this." That admission, though validating, brought no comfort. It only deepened the ache of realizing how blind I'd been to her nature for so long. The divorce was finalized, 94 days after that fateful evening. She didn't appear for the final hearing. Her lawyer, not her brother, but a weary-looking professional who had clearly seen her type before, simply processed the paperwork with mechanical efficiency. No contests, no further delays. Perhaps she'd finally accepted the inevitable. As I walked out of the courthouse, Rachel called. She and the others had become fixtures in my life again, our friendship rebuilt on stronger foundations. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I just put down a weight I never should have picked up," I answered honestly, though my voice caught slightly. "Any regrets about how you handled it?" I thought about the question carefully, my heart heavy with the memory of what was and what could have been. "No," I said finally. Sometimes a clean break is the only way forward. She handed me an ultimatum disguised as non-negotiable demands. I responded with clarity, even if it hurt. 6 months later, I moved to a new neighborhood, not running away, but moving forward. I heard through mutual acquaintances that my ex-wife had started dating someone new, a quiet, agreeable type who wouldn't challenge her need for control. I wished him better luck than I'd had, or perhaps the wisdom to recognize the red flag sooner. As for me, I built my life on my own terms. No demands, no ultimatums, no power struggles, just clear boundaries and mutual respect. The woman I eventually started dating months later was struck by how direct and transparent I was about expectations. Most men play games, she observed. You just say exactly what you need. Life's too short for games, I told her, a quiet conviction in my voice born from hard-won lessons. And non-negotiable demands only work when both sides have the option to walk away. That's the lesson I carried forward. When someone hands you a list of demands, they're not looking for a partner. They're looking for a subject, and I'd rather be alone than surrender my autonomy to anyone ever again. My ex-wife's 24 non-negotiable demands had been meant to cage me. Instead, they became the key that set me free. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I could have seen the signs earlier. If I could have saved us both from the pain of those final months. There's a part of me that still grieves the love we had in the beginning, the moments of laughter and warmth that felt so effortless. But those moments were overshadowed by her need to control, a need that grew until it consumed everything we'd built. I don't hate her, not anymore. Hate would mean giving her power over me still, and I've reclaimed that power for myself. Instead, I feel a quiet sorrow for the person she became, and a fierce gratitude for the person I rediscovered in myself. This ordeal didn't just end a marriage, it taught me the value of my own voice, my own boundaries, and the strength it takes to stand up for them. For that, I'll always be thankful, even if the cost was steep.